Bushfire brigades are all too aware of the potential hazards they face every summer right across the state, and often their worst fears are realised. 12 volunteers have died in fires in the last 2 decades. Now, senior members of the Bushfire Brigades Association are touring the state. Their aim to raise $400,000 for a clinical nursing course at Sydney University, specialising in the treatment of burns victims. The team was in Newcastle today, pressing the case for extra medical support.
Well, there is reasonable treatment available, but it's very limited. There is only 24 beds in the state, and most of those are in the metropolitan area.
The association says it's not just bushfire fighters who will benefit, but all burns victims. However, they are taking a special interest in the cause.
The bushfire brigades are acting as collection points all around the state for us, so they're all helping us, and all brigades are participating in it.
A fundraising appeal will be broadcast on most radio stations this weekend. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Staff shortages have been officially recognised at 4 ambulance stations in the region: Doyleson, Coorambong, Raymond Terrace and Nelson Bay. The matter was brought to a head last week when Anna Bay man Terry Pendergast had to drive an ambulance towards Nelson Bay while the ambulanceman was in the back treating his elderly mother who'd suffered a heart attack. There's no way that can happen again, at least for the next month.
The staff at Nelson Bay Station have drawn up a roster whereby they donate some of their available time when they're not on shift to be able to provide an extra service and get a second officer in the car as the needs require.
It's 2 months now since ambulance management approached the Minister for Health Services, Ron Phillips, over the staffing situation after its own survey indicated that an extra 45 officers are needed district-wide. But Macquarie Street has remained silent on the issue.
There's no indication as to whether the Treasury has provided the funding for it. So in an effort to provide a service that we consider will be at least adequate until such times as the extra officers come, this is what we're doing.
Ambulance officers say their being on call for no extra money could be extended to Doyleson, Coorambong and Raymond Terrace, but warn the move is a temporary goodwill gesture. If there's no reply from the Minister within the month, then industrial action will be considered.
It's become a tradition in horse circles. The Scone Thoroughbred Sales are part of Scone Horse Week, 7 days of equine celebrations. $220 mares and weanlings were put to the market today, with bloodstock fanciers digging deep for the right horse.
We've got mares here today that range from as low as $250 to $300 right through to some mares, into the tens of thousands.
This mare, French Finale, was passed in for $25,000. French Finale has had 3 stakes wins, including a victory at Randwick. On Sunday, the yearlings will hit the market, and that's where prices should really kick. Meanwhile, Scone continues the party all week with dinners, race days, polo and riding events.
I've been involved with horses as long as I can walk, and I just hope that I've had a lot of fun out of horses, enjoyed it, met a lot of wonderful people and had a lot of great times, and I just hope that I can stick with the horse sports.
As the bulldozers move in, the koalas are being forced to move out. In an attempt to save the koalas' natural habitat, residents in the Port Stephens area will be asked to complete questionnaires.
What we're hoping is that people will fill that in with where they've seen koalas recently. If they've got historical stuff like where koalas used to live, that's really useful. And also if they haven't seen any, it's important for us to know where they don't live as well as where they do.
The National Parks and Wildlife Service, together with the local council, want to document koala colonies in the region. Armed with that information, Shire President Bob Horn says they hope to plant more native trees linking the koala's natural habitats. He believes property developments in the area won't wipe out this endangered species.
The two can coexist. If we plan correctly, we can make sure that they continue to coexist. You know, it doesn't have to be wall-to-wall development, and I don't think people are coming to the Bay for that sort of thing.
Residents should receive the survey next week. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Considered the Equine Centre of Australia, Scone has celebrated with Horse Week. Tours of the region's stud farms, horse parades and yearling sales just part of the program for the past few days. But the spotlight switches to the track tomorrow for the running of the Cup, and this year's 1400 metre event has attracted a crack field. Heading the list, New Zealander Be Happy, second in last week's Tamworth Cup. Our resident tipster Gary Harley is also keen on Be Happy, and he has selected it in front of Flemington trainer Lee Friedman's Knightage and the Randwick-trained Pumpernickel.
Councillor Bailey believes Narrabri Council has lost face over the saga that has cost 3 paid councillors their jobs. He says information has been withheld from council members, the media and ratepayers.
The meetings are become very bitter, and it is really causing a great division.
Councillor Bailey says a date for the hearing into the sackings is yet to be fixed, and he's called on the Minister for Local Government, Jerry Peacock, to conduct the investigation into the council's conduct.
I think the suspension case has dragged on far too long, and I believe was unnecessary in the first place. It should have been dealt with in-house, and that has resulted in great cost in human and monetary terms. And I think generally, as it drags on more and more each day, it's just getting worse. This council, I believe, is just a joke.
Meanwhile, the Chamber of Commerce has asked Wal Murray to take the matter up with Industrial Relations Minister John Fahey.
The situation exists which is not tenable with good government in this shire, and we want to see it fixed up.
Only 2 days ago, the board of the Hunter Service assured the public that no matter what debate about administration was raging behind the scenes, the frontline operations of saving lives were not affected.
And you've got a good service. There's no problem with the customer. Have no fear about that.
But now all 9 volunteer crewmen have announced they're walking out, leaving what they believe is a gaping hole in jobs such as assisting the pilots and paramedics.
The volunteer crew were an inherent part of the helicopter rescue service.
The service's new General Manager, Alan McMahon, claims the walkout won't make a difference to operations.
Well, we have the availability through our agreement and through Sydney SLSA helicopters to transfer crewmen to here, if need be, and that will be done.
The volunteers have announced they're withdrawing because of what they see as the improper sacking of pilot Keith Stewart by the Sydney Surf Life-Saving Company, SLSA Helicopters. They say the reasons for the sacking are vague, and if they can't get answers, they intend to go beyond quitting.
It's not beyond the realm of possibility that the Attorney General may be asked to intercede in the dispute once again.
While the volunteers are expressing fears that the Hunter Board appears to be a puppet of the Sydney company, questions are being asked about the service agreement signed 2 weeks ago between SLSA Helicopters and this region's organisation. Peter McCormack from a rival helicopter rescue group called Careflight says the SLSA's monthly management fee to the Hunter of $12,300 is too much. Mr McCormack claims that the Hunter operations could be serviced for as little as $1,000 a month.
That is an absolute ridiculous assessment.
Graham Wright claims the Hunter is getting value for money from the SLSA management fee and is the most cost-effective option for the service. But as operations director of the company that recommended Keith Stewart's dismissal, Mr Wright won't say why the pilot was sacked.
I'm not at liberty to discuss it. You'll have to get any information on that score from the board itself.
The volunteers are meeting again tonight to discuss their next move in this latest chapter in the Chopper drama. Scott Bevan, NBN News. Only 2 days ago, the board of the Hunter Service assured the public that no matter what debate about administration was raging behind the scenes, the frontline operations of saving lives were not affected.
And you've got a good service. There's no problem with the customer. Have no fear about that.
But now all 9 volunteer crewmen have announced they're walking out, leaving what they believe is a gaping hole in jobs such as assisting the pilots and paramedics.
The volunteer crew were an inherent part of the helicopter rescue service.
The service's new general manager, Alan McMahon, claims the walkout won't make a difference to operations.
Well, we have the availability through our agreement and through Sydney SLSA helicopters to transfer crewmen to here if need be, and that will be done.
The volunteers have announced they're withdrawing because of what they see as the improper sacking of pilot Keith Stewart by the Sydney surf life-saving company SLSA Helicopters. They say the reasons for the sacking are vague, and if they can't get answers, they intend to go beyond quitting.
It's not beyond the realm of possibility that the Attorney General may be asked to intercede in the dispute once again.
Neither the Hunter Board nor SLSA Helicopters will explain why the pilot was sacked.
I'm not at liberty to discuss it. You'll have to get any information on that score from the board itself.
The volunteers are meeting again tonight to discuss their next move in this latest chapter in the Chopper drama. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
The meetings, attended by department staff and members of the North West Catchment Management Committee, looked at how New South Wales agriculture could improve its role in land care work.
We've got a major association with, something like 17 land care groups throughout the North West. But it's a very important concept, and it's something that's very important to the health of the environment and agriculture in the North West, and we have to continue doing more.
David Hartley says the only way sustainable agriculture can be further promoted and adopted is for as many individuals and government agencies as possible becoming involved.
Soilcon certainly have. They've done a wonderful job with land care over the last 4 or 5 years. It's up to agriculture now to get in and do our bit. As I said, agriculture has already been quite active in it, but we have to heighten our profile and continue to do even more with the land care concept.
It's a commitment the North West Catchment Management Group has welcomed.
Whilst there have been individuals working very, very well in various areas throughout the region, it's very comforting and encouraging to see that it's now happening on a total regional level.
Six trucks ran a shuttle service with more than 300 cubic metres of concrete for the ground floor. Another 7 pours will be needed to complete this part of the project. The foundations for the original grid were laid in 1989 and a start was made last January on driving the 200 piles. The RSL decided to build the $12 million complex because it has outgrown its original premises. Maintenance manager Ted Brown said that the new club building would provide better facilities for the 12,000 members. About 3,000 people will comfortably be housed in the new complex, which is expected to be a major tourist attraction for visitors to Port Macquarie. The complex is designed to enhance views from the beach, the Hastings River and the mountains. It will also feature 12 retail shops. Stage 2 will be an auditorium. This should commence early next year. The whole complex is expected to be finished by March 1993. The FA-18 Hornet was reported missing during a practice bombing exercise 100 kilometres northeast of Rockhampton just after 11 a.m. The crash was reported by a second Hornet. It's understood the pilot of the downed fighter gave no indication of a problem. The $40 million aircraft is usually a one-seat design, but some are modified for dual training. It was only some hours after the crash that the RAAF revealed that 2 crewmen were missing. They were Flying Officer Rob Jepson from the New South Wales Central Coast and civilian defence scientist Michael Howlett, 36, from Melbourne, who's believed to have relatives in Cessnock. Late this afternoon, Commander of the Tactical Fighter Group, Air Commodore Brian Weston, confirmed the Air Force's worst fears.
At this stage, we believe the crew is missing, believed dead, as the circumstances of the accident and the lack of ejection seats or parachutes in the area and the impact angle of the aircraft all lead us to believe that the crash was not survivable.
A full search will resume tomorrow in a region off Shoalwater Bay east of Cape Clinton. It's believed the area is a restricted airspace designated for military exercises. The fighter was one of 10 aircraft from 77 Squadron on an annual training operation from its home base at RAF Williamtown. News of the crash spread quickly.
Well, an aircraft crash is a very tragic event, and any unit is somewhat like a family, and it's probably akin to someone in a family being involved in a motor traffic accident.
The Air Force says the crash won't have any bearing on immediate fighter operations. However, they don't rule out the possibility of a review of that situation pending the outcome of a crash investigation. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
It was a veritable feast of unveiling. In Armidale, the Minister opened the college's new $420,000 tourism and hospitality unit. Mr Fay says the facility will help keep Australia ahead of the world's catering industry.
We are to the forefront throughout the world with some of our hospitality and catering graduates. We're recognised, I've had it pointed out to me in other countries of the world, as being to the forefront. We must continue to ensure that our service industry has the best possible skills there, and that ultimately gives a message to its visitors: come again, we're looking after you and we'll continue to look after you, and we want to look after you.
At Glen Innes, it was TAFE's Stage 2 building project, 5 buildings which will house tourism and hospitality, the arts, media and general education. And at Inverell, he opened the college's refurbished classrooms, which have been lifted above flood level. Mr Fay says TAFE takes a high priority. It has an invaluable role to play.
Over any given period of time, that communities by and large survive on the skills that flow from TAFE colleges. So I can't underestimate the role that it plays. It's enormous.
At tomorrow's community rally, the people of Glen Innes will voice concern about the treatment they have received from the government over the past 5 years. The Chamber of Commerce and most businesses will close during the meeting to allow employees to attend. The Glen Innes public sector has been continually plagued with job cuts in areas such as the Forestry Commission, Health Services and more recently the Roads and Traffic Authority. This is seen as damaging to the town.
Innes and other small areas such as Glen Innes, they're static. They haven't got the tourist population, and they're a good stable town, but if they're going to take all the government jobs away from the towns like this, there's no industry left in Glen Innes to absorb them. they have to shift. They have to shift out of town unless they can find other employment, which is pretty scarce.
Glen Innes local member Ray Chappell is also expected to attend the meeting, where further steps of action will be determined.
Slag is a byproduct of the lead-making process. The Lake Macquarie Council buys the granulated slag from Pasminco. For more than 20 years, it's been used as landfill and in road construction throughout the area.
Council is concerned about the potential for injury to the health of the residents brought about by the long-term use of slag in the past by residents and the council.
The town clerk, John Rankin, authorised private occupational health experts to investigate whether the slag is a health risk. Samples from the council's stockpile are being analysed.
I would perceive if anybody was to be risked, it may be young children who may be exposed to uncovered sections of this material in backyards. They might be playing in it.
David Sinclair from Pasminco says the company believes the slag is not dangerous. He says it meets the Environment Protection Authority's criteria for landfill. However, he stressed that the material should be used as fill and not topsoil. The results of the council's study should be known within a fortnight. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The 21-year-old from the Belmont TAFE has won 5 state and local awards for academic excellence. It's an achievement recognised in the trade field and by Darren's employers at the Pacific Power Switchyard at Waratah. The modest fitter works in a high-voltage world of sub and power stations, linking the region's electricity network between supplier and consumer. He hopes to stay on in the Hunter at the end of his apprenticeship. Darren often has to scale tall towers for the installation and maintenance of switchyards, but the theoretical studies have taken him to great heights as well.
It was very interesting for me because I've always been interested in it, so it just came naturally for me.
This secluded bushland setting has a special significance to many of Newcastle's older residents. According to local folklore, it was one of several illegal two-up rings. Now, Newcastle Council Parks and Gardens wants to restore the site to its former glory as part of the Jesmond Bushland project. The ring would be incorporated for historical interest into a series of walking tracks now under construction. Parks and Gardens manager Bob Rain says this was one of the better-known rings.
Well, I can recall one of them in here going back 30 odd years when we were in here getting bushstone for one of our landscape jobs for the council, and it was well worn. I'd say it was well used.
This is a contemporary Australian sacred site. Although there's nothing here now, in the 50s and 60s men would gather in circles out here and shout, "Come in, Spinner, come in, Spinner." It's still possible to imagine the clandestine gatherings. Rumour has it that hundreds of pounds changed hands. Very big money in those days.
I believe it was well out of sight of the local law, and they had time to disperse into the assorted areas of the bushland around. They could get away as soon as the cockatoo gave the word that somebody was on the way.
Nowadays, two-up has some legitimacy. It's legal in casinos and, of course, on Anzac Day. But council officers doubt that restoring the bushland site will bring about a resurgence of the game. It's more likely to remain a monument to Australia's larrikin past. Tom Hilston, NBN News. This publication, Fantastic Sex Facts, is creating quite a fuss. Its explicit coverage of issues ranging from gay and lesbian relationships to masturbation and abortion would probably have gone unnoticed, except that members of the radical student group Resistance began selling copies of the broadsheet outside Newcastle high schools. Much of the material is drawn from the Fact and Fantasy file, banned from schools by the federal government.
The sex diary as well as Fantastic Sex Facts came out because of a survey that was conducted which said that 61% of young people under the age of 16 were having sex and only 30% of them knew about sexually transmitted diseases.
The group went to Newcastle Grammar School this morning. Tomorrow they'll go to Merewether High. Those students were at a sports carnival today. Principal Alan Ebert says the school is baffled by the attention.
We teach a program in our school in personal development, health and physical education, where we have trained teachers and we have plenty of resources in the school. We don't need additional resources to teach that, and we teach a program which has the support and satisfaction of our parents and the students.
But Resistance begs to differ.
I suppose we are challenging, the system and its effectiveness. I mean, by the survey it reveals that it is not effective. Young people aren't being educated on sexual issues that affect them,
It's over 50 years since the Salvation Army opened its doors to house Newcastle's homeless men. This morning it opened its doors to local dignitaries, but it was more than a breakfast, letting them know what goes on inside these walls, in the bare dormitories, empty by day, by night, a hotel for the homeless.
They're here because they are homeless. They don't have the finances to get themselves into other accommodation, or they've got themselves into such a bind that they're unable to pay for their other accommodation.
That's what the Red Shield Appeal is all about, and it's people like that who fill the 22-bed hostel every night.
Very few nights where we do have any vacancies at all. In fact, most times we actually have to turn men away from here because we just don't have the accommodation available.
Max Hale has run the hostel for 6 years. He's seen the good as well as the bad, men lifting themselves, getting themselves back on the rails, and he hopes the Salvos gave their breakfast guests something to chew over.
The floodways in the Narrabri-Wee-Waa district are vital in directing water flow in the Namoy River system further downstream. They're designed to ensure as little damage as possible is caused to valuable farming land, houses and the two towns. But the state of repair of some of the watercourses is causing concern.
The thing that sort of concerns me is that the floodways that we've designed through this area over the last 20 years, which are very important that they're kept in a clear condition, seem to be tending to become a bit overgrown with vegetation. In some areas people have put channels across them, and that really is a worry, because if they don't function properly as clean open floodways, when a flood comes along the water's not going to go where it should go.
Farmers trying to maximise returns for crops often use the floodways for sowing wheat or cotton and at times sorghum. Peter Millington says while some crops can be grown in the channels and won't restrict the flow, others like sorghum should be kept well away from the watercourses. He says the department is also reviewing the effectiveness of the Wee Waa levy as part of a review of 21 banks statewide. While Narrabri Council wants the levy raised, Peter Millington says nothing can be done until the report is finalised in June.
And after that we would have to make an assessment of whether the levy does need strengthening or raising or whatever. And until I get that report, it would be premature to make any comment, really.
It's the second time Taree has hosted this contest of law-enforcing sportsmen and women. In the past, they visited Coffs Harbour, Port Macquarie and Grafton, and next year they'll play in Kempsey. 10 teams are contesting this year's event.
We've got teams from Tweed Heads, 2 teams from Lismore, Coffs Harbour, Toukley and Chatswood, plus the local teams, Foster, a couple of others.
There's about 150 people in Taree for the competition. Some are ex-first grade players playing what's billed as a bit of fun.
It's an event that actually gets us police together, and it's a social event basically, but they take it fairly seriously. They don't hold out in the tackles, which they're not supposed to do, but they do. And they actually play for prize money, which has been donated by local business people, which normally the winners of the prize money usually donate some form of charity. I think the team that won it last year was from North Sydney, and they donated their money to the Bingham Flood Appeal.
Toukley detectives are considering the possibility of a firebug at large in the area. The residents of neighbouring Viewpoint Road homes were awoken by the sound of crackling timber as an unoccupied holiday house went up in smoke just after 1 a.m. Firefighters managed to save several rooms of the house and prevented the fire from spreading next door. Traces of accelerant were found around the home, along with unignited fire starters stuffed into furniture. The cottage's Sydney owners salvaged what they could from the house. An hour before being called to the house, brigades had doused another deliberately lit blaze at a nearby Gorican petrol station. The business closed last weekend and the buildings are being demolished prior to the redevelopment of the site. Rubbish had been set alight in a back storeroom with the flames spreading into an empty workshop area. An unoccupied fibro cottage a few doors away was destroyed by fire a week ago, and late last month a school and petrol station was severely damaged by deliberately lit fires at Mount White.
The Save Our Rail group was out early this morning gathering signatures and urging people to attend Wednesday's public meeting on the future of the city's rail line. One of 4 aldermen lobbying commuters was Alderman John Tate.
I've spoken to young folk who are travelling from places like Thornton and Medford, and I've spoken to disabled people who are travelling from Cooranbong. Now, if they didn't have a rail service to this part of town, they just wouldn't be able to get here.
We use it all nearly every week to go to the beach and everything, yeah.
So you'd be a bit put out if they cut it off at Civic?
Yeah, really.
The state government has decided the line will stop at Civic Station, freeing up land for the Honeysuckle redevelopment. Supporting the government is the Chamber of Commerce. They believe Wednesday's meeting will only undermine government support for the revitalisation of the city. Jodie McKay, NBN News.